Okay, we are now on chapter 2. Mary has finished her missionary school and she is on a boat. She is sailing. Let's get a picture here. If you can see, Scotland up here, and then she's sailing down to Africa, Nigeria, and in Nigeria there is Calabar right here. So that is exactly where she's headed. She is on a boat. Again, this is not today's where you could hop on a plane and be there in a short amount of time. Instead, she was weeks on the boat. And she was asking the captain all kinds of questions. He wasn't too excited, first of all, about taking a lady to Africa. And he kept, girl, no place to be for a woman. And then she would ask him a question. He goes, cannibals, they're all cannibals. Remember what that is. They will have you over for dinner, and then they have you for dinner. Well, that didn't stop Mary, even though people were constantly telling her, you don't want to go there. Mary was more than determined that this is exactly where God wanted her. And again, if that's where God wanted her, she would be no safer place than in the will of God. She was headed to Calabar, and she was going to land into a place where as she tried to tell the captain, they had law and order in Dukestown. And he'd say, lady, it's not Scotland. But when she got there, she fell in love with the African customs. It didn't take her long to get rid of the big full dresses that she was typically worn in Scotland. And it wasn't long before she could say, I've climbed every tree around. But more importantly, she worked with Chief, his name was Honesty, the 7th, and they had church. And she loved sharing the gospel with all the people. One day when she was out and about, she came across some other people. And they came to her because they had never seen a person with her white, pale skin. And they all crowded around her. And she was learning the language, and she began to tell them that what the Bible said. And she was a little nervous for the first time, not having one of the chief or the other missionaries around to help her. But the more she told them, the more she realized that here she was telling these people for the first time about Jesus. And it didn't take her long to get a burden. And she thought, here I am on Dukestown. There's already some missionaries here. We've got to establish church. Remember, they were right on the coast. And she knew that further into the village, further into the inland, there were more villages. And she knew those villages had not heard about Jesus. And Mary began to pray. And all the missionaries there in Dukestown, even big old Chief Edom Honesty, you don't want to go there. It seemed like the more people told Mary she didn't want to do something, the more God was saying, yes, that's where you need to go. Thankfully, Mary listened to God instead of people. You would think when you decide to do something for the Lord, that people around you would support you. But boys and girls, that's not always the case. No matter what you do or when you do it in your life, when you decide to do what's right, there is always going to be something trying to stop you. You have to decide in your heart, I'm going to do what's right no matter what. No matter if the people around me do what's right, I'm going to do what's right. And thankfully, Mary had learned in such an early and even God had used her childhood to help instill in her the sense of doing what was right. And even though it was hard to stick with it, well, Mary remembered when she first went into the next little village, the chief had helped it set up, and now she was leaving Dukestown and going to Oldstown. Oldstown, And Mary remembered the day she visited this little village. She saw people dancing around and circles in the drummers and the drumming. And she tried to fall asleep that night. And the party and the drumming, the dancing, the drinking, all that still kept going through all night long. She felt like she could just feel the evil presence that was in that town. And she just prayed all night long. See, she had realized that she had thought back in Scotland that the people of Canterbury had no religion, but that was not true. They had a religion, all right. What they didn't have was a relationship with Jesus Christ. Their religion was that of witchcraft, the religion of putting everything first, a religion based on fear, not love. Mary realized that they did everything in fear. Don't do that. It will upset the spirits. Don't do that. It will upset a spirit. And it even burdened her heart even more that they needed to know that there was a God that doesn't teach fear, but teaches love. Mary also learned another custom that they had. And that custom was if a woman gave birth to twins, oh, that was bad luck. And they would beat the mother, and they would take one of the twins and leave it in the woods to please some God and get rid of that evil spirit of having two babies. Well, Mary, she took that upon her, and every time she found out there was a twin being born, she would go off and she would rescue that twin. The very first twin that she rescued was Janie. She named her that. She named her Janie. And it didn't take long. Mary had 5 kids now. And Janie was the oldest. And here Mary is, busy telling people about Jesus, building a church, and raising an instant family. And just even the work that it took to just feed and take care of everybody. But that didn't stop Mary. No, no, no. And one day, when she was busy leaning over a pot, she heard this awful sound. It was this skrill, and she knew instantly it was not good. She looked around, and there was a black panther holding one of her babies in its mouth. Mary picked up from the fire a big old stick and whopped the panther upside the head, and he dropped the baby and went running. The baby didn't even have a scratch on it. Now, God certainly was watching out for the Mary at this time. Mary was now getting to be known all over the other villages. And one day, a native came with 12 other men with him. And they told Mary that their chief wanted to meet with her. Now, where their chief was 30 miles away. And here, he had sent a canoe. He had sent everything for Mary to come. And she thought, what do I do? Well, the chief of Old Town, of course, said, you don't want to go there. And Mary knew, yep, that's where she was going. The trip took 10 hours for her to get there. And Mary had even fallen asleep in the canoe. She had left the babies to be taken care of with the people in Old Town. And women for miles all came in. People came all around as she was in this village. And when she got back, she again was burdened. For there was further people deeper into the jungles and deeper into the part of Africa that still had not heard Jesus. One night when she got back, in this time, they were known to have terrible, terrible storms. And one night, a terrible tornado came through. Now remember, these little huts were just made out of straw and mud, and really not tornado safe. But she huddled her kids together in the middle of it, and they began to sing songs, and they sang their whole heart out, and all night long. It wasn't long, Mary realized she was actually very sick, and she had a very bad temperature, and finally, she got so ill that the doctor told her that if she was going to live, she would have to go back to Scotland to recover. Oh, Mary did not want to do that, but she felt she had no other choice. She was so ill. At this point, some of her little children that she had rescued, and now her little 5 had grown to about 20 kids. They were starting to the older ones were starting to take care of the younger ones. And she had to leave her children, but her oldest Janie went with her. And she went back to Scotland to recover. But as soon as she got well enough, Mary began going to the churches. And she began to tell them about Canabar. And she wanted to tell them that, you know what, we need more missionaries. One night, as she was at the church, a young lady came up to her named Jessie. And Mary, her short little self, marched up to her and said, "Jessie, now what is it that's keeping you from going to Africa and serving the Lord?" Jessie again was so startled by Mary's abruptness. But she thought it for a second, and she thought about it, and she looked at Mary and said, "Well, nothing, I guess." And it wasn't long after prayer, Jessie was realizing that God used Mary to help awaken what he was wanting her to do. And wasn't long, Jessie was headed to Africa to be a missionary as well. Now, when Mary got back, she was met by a man decked out in feathers, and he stepped forward and he said, "Welcome home, Ma." And Ma is what they called her. In fact, they even often called her the White Ma. And he was the first one to meet her. And then he announced the wonderful news that their chief had made there in Old Town. And it was the news that the twins would no longer be killed. Mary was rejoicing over that. Over all these years, for the first time, the baby's life would be saved. You see, boys and girls, God cares about the babies. And he doesn't want to see anyone murdered. And even though we look at this and go, "Wow, why would anyone kill a twin?" But yet today, babies are still being killed. In fact, it's even legal to kill them. It's called abortion. And that's something we're going to have to learn, especially, and it's going to take boys and girls for you guys to grow up and to value and to stand up for the right for these babies, just like Mary had to stand up for the right of these twins. Again, it wasn't very long. And here comes a group of canoers again to come and take Mary to see a chief that she wanted to see, that wanted to see her, I should say. And at first, Mary wasn't sure if she would go, but she prayed about it, and she knew that this was indeed where God would want her. And we'll see what happens when she goes.